I'm hanging out in the barn with the calves. These animals, they know what the barn is, and so it's real easy. I just walk them over here, and they just walk straight up in here. Yesterday I think I got a cold. I got something going on with my sinus. I think I got a chest cold or something like that. But I feel okay. I just got a lot of congestion. And so these animals right now, I'm sitting here with the animals. I let them out at the night. So when I go to work and then I come back in the evening, I let them out. And I let them out, and in the morning before I leave for work, I put them all back in the barn. And the reason that I do that is because these animals, they're tiny little calves, right? They're tiny little calves. I'm effectively weaning them, right, and preconditioning them in this barn. I'm preconditioning them myself. And these little calves, the smaller the animal is, the harder of a time you will have with that animal, okay? This is the golden rule kind of deal. There's no going around it. It just is what it is. The smaller of an animal that you have, the harder it becomes. And when you start going under 200 pounds, you are entering the danger zone, okay? These animals, I brought them in at 168 pounds on the average. And, when you start going under 200 pounds, you are entering the danger zone. And I would not suggest, I am legitimately telling you this with the utmost sincerity, that I would not suggest doing something like this. Unless, if you want to go and do it, the whole thing about this is when I take a look back at it, and the thing is that, okay, like my situation, I'll just tell you about my situation, is that I actually learned how to run cattle by running cattle like this, by running calves like this. I actually learned how to run cattle by running calves like this. And so, it'd be kind of hypocritical for me to say not to do this. But the reason that I am saying not to do this, if you don't know what you're doing, is because the sheer level of difficulty, okay, if I had known better, I would have done differently. All right, because, if you start off with even just 250 pound calves, it'll be a lot easier. I'm not going to say it's easy, and by the time you go up to 350 pound calves, I would even suggest 350 pound calves. You can buy a 350 pound calf right now for $1,400, $1,200 to $1,400. And when you raise that animal, you can still get $1,800, $1,900 for that animal, right? You can still make money. And that 350 pound calf, for you to make $1,800 on that animal, we're talking about, you just need to put maybe about 250, 250 pounds on that animal. If you take them up to, 600, you can make you can make $400 on that animal. You subtract your expenses, and you still make, like $300 on that animal. Right. And so, the whole thing is that when it comes to running these animals, the smaller that your animal is, the harder it becomes. Okay. And when you start entering that under 250 pound range, you are entering a situation where you're entering a different playing field. Okay. You're not running cattle, you're running calves. All right. You're running little baby calves. And running baby calves is the hardest thing that you can do, okay? Their immune systems are the least developed. Their rumens are the least developed. They need the most attention. Lots of problems, okay? There are a lot of things that need to be handled with these calves to make sure that things go properly. And in terms of just the utmost sincerity, I would suggest learning how to run a 350 pound animal, okay? If you're feeling real ambitious, you could do a 250 pound animal, and and I'm just saying that, because when I look back in my life, and it just is what it is, if I had known, but at the end of the day, the whole thing about this is that, I talk about this all the time. And I'm not looking to be arrogant about it. I'm not looking to be a prick about it. But the sheer level of difficulty, very oftentimes, The level of difficulty is the reason why people quit. All right, I'm already telling you, the whole thing about this is that, it just is what it is, okay? In terms of a reality sense, I actually do this stuff in real life. All right, I'm not giving you my opinion. All right, I'm not asking anybody for anything. I'm not asking anybody for anything. I'm not selling my soul to the devil. I'm not doing some malicious thing. Farming, if it was easy, everybody would do it. All right, and in terms of a reality sense, I legitimately do not know anybody even doing 10%. I make more money running cattle on 50 acres than anybody on the planet makes doing just about anything. All right, I make drastically more money, especially when you include the equity evaluation of what I do, because I start these businesses by myself. All right, I don't go on, it's not some delusional fantasy. All right, I actually start these businesses by myself. And when you take a look at how much my business has grown, I legitimately grew my business by over 1,000% in the last 2.5 years. That's how much my business has grown. All right, I legitimately grew my business by over 1,000%. And I will tell you about the reality situation of what am I looking to do right now. And, and I will tell you the direction that I'm going, because I've already told you exactly what I was going to do, more or less. This is the direction that I'm going. Because right now I'm effectively sitting here and I have $17,000 left over in my bank account. I have 28 stabilized animals. Those animals will probably continue to go up in value for at least another 3 months. And I can pay myself whatever I need, whenever I need it, effectively, to a reasonable degree. Granted that I don't be an idiot. I have stabilized animals right now. I have 28 stabilized animals. All right, they've been here for several months. They've already gone up in value, and they will continue to go up in value for several more months. And I'm sitting here with $17,000 cash, right? And I have these 15 animals that are higher risk. So my big idea right now is that I will take, so I'm going to go and take a look at my lease property this weekend, and I'm going to go and see what the water looks like. And if the water looks okay, I will take 7 animals out from the backfield. I will take 7 animals from out over here, and I will take them over to the lease property. And then I'll bring in a few bigger calves, and I will precondition them in the back. So that will effectively solve my problem for now. That will give me an opportunity to reinvest just the money that I make. I am legitimately not taking any debt at all right now. I'm not using any debt. All right, I am legitimately using zero leverage, which is not an ideal situation. But if I were going to use leverage, I would have to buy, I wouldn't be buying 30 cattle, I would be buying 60. And when you include the fact that I have 28 stabilized animals, I would even leverage against those animals too. So I wouldn't be buying 60, I would be buying 90. And the reason that I'm not using leverage, and if I did that, I would not even be under a 1-to-1. I would not even be over 1-to-1, excuse me. I would still be under 1-to-1 leverage on my balance sheet, and I would have 120 cattle. But what am I going to do with 120 cattle, right? The big idea is that I will deleverage my balance sheet and buy a new piece of land. And when I buy a new piece of land, then I will buy the 120 cattle. All right, that's the big idea, right? I've already clearly stated this is exactly where I'm going, more or less. This is the direction that I'm going. All right, and so the situation that I'm in right now is that I have 28 stabilized animals, and they've already appreciated in value. I've already raised their value, and I've purchased all of these animals at a reasonable appraisal value, and the commodity markets have effectively gone sideways. And so I'm taking a look at my situation, and I'm not even using any debt, and I am still growing. Okay, here's another way to look at it. Before I sold these, so when I go and I use this money to buy more animals, I will have about 60 animals. So take a look at this. Take a look at it like this. I started off with 47, and I raised the number of animals that I have to 60 by just taking the money that it might even be 62. It might even be 62 animals. 60 to 62 animals, 58 to 62 animals, something like that. And I bought a load of grain, right? And I also bought a load of grain, right? And if I legitimately need more money, I can pay myself whatever I need to a reasonable degree. So I take a look at my situation, then what does that translate into? How much has my balance sheet grown in the last 2 weeks? Let's just imagine that I actually do what I say I'm going to do. And the whole thing about me is that when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I tell you clearly exactly what direction I'm going. I clearly indicate this is what I will do, and then I stick to my word, right? And when it comes down to it, I think very heavily about my plans. I don't just throw myself into the wind. All right, why? I think about what will I do, and then I clearly indicate exactly what direction I'm gonna go, and then it just is what it is. So I've already clearly indicated what I will do, right? I will go and take a look at my lease property. If my lease property looks okay, I will load up 7 of these animals in the back and I will take them over to the lease property, and then I will precondition new calves in the back. That will raise my animals up to about 60 animals, and I will have started with 47. In this situation, how many animals have I brought in, right? How many animals have I gone net positive? Right, 13 animals, right? I've gone net positive 13 animals. What's 13 in ratio to 47? Right, I mean, it's just over a third, right? It's just over a third. Right, and I may even bring home, or is it just 13, 26, 39? I don't know, but it's just under under a third. Something like that. But my balance sheet has effectively appreciated by about 20% or something like that. 20%, 25%. And I'm not using any debt. I've legitimately increased my income. Let's just say that I do what I say I'm gonna do. Let's just imagine. Let's just use our creativity. Let's just use our imaginary muscle. The imagination muscle. I'm not gonna call it the imaginary muscle because that's kind of misleading. I'll call it the imagination muscle. Let's just imagine that I do what I say I'm gonna do, and I take my $17,500 and I just buy more cattle with it. How many animals? Actually, I missed. That's why the percentage is low. Is because $17,500 is not going to buy me 13 cattle. It'll buy me like 20. It'll buy me like 20. So I'll end up with like 64 animals, not 60. I will end up with like 64. It'll buy me like 18 animals. If I bought 18 animals, I would still have enough money left over to buy an entire another load of grain or 2 loads of fertilizer. I mean, but let's just use our imagination, and let's just say that I do what I say I'm going to do, right? When I do it, I will have effectively grown my balance sheet by like a 35%. All right, I will have effectively grown my balance sheet by 35%. And if I grow my balance sheet by 35%, then I have also increased my income by 35%. All right, that's, very simple, right? It's not some complicated thing. And so I'm taking a look at my situation, and and here's the thing. If I legitimately felt like I needed more money, which I don't ever think about that. I have plenty of money. If I legitimately feel like I need more money, which I don't ever think about, I make more money running cattle than anybody on the planet makes doing just about anything. All right, I don't ever think about needing more money. I don't. That's kind of a worthless thing to think about, because why would I think about that when I can just think about farming, and when I farm I make massive amounts of money, right? Let's just use our logic for a minute. And so the whole thing about everything, I will go and I will take a look at my lease property, and if my lease property looks okay, I will take my animals over to that lease property, and then I'll bring in more animals. I will effectively be expanding my balance sheet by like 40%. All right. And, I'm not using any debt at all, legitimately using zero leverage. And here's the thing. Let's say that I'm in a situation where I have reasonably appraised my assets, right? You cannot be in a situation where you are being delusional about your appraisal values, because at the end of the day, lying to yourself is not going to do anything, right? When it comes to appraising an asset, you have to be very, objective about it, and you have to understand your asset. All right, appraising an asset, you have to be very objectively straightforward about it. So let's say I take a look at my balance sheet and I say, well, I have 28 animals and I've raised them for 2 months. I have 28 animals and I've raised them for 3 months. And in that 3 months, I actually have determined that they put on about, let's just say 75 pounds a month, just to give it a low kind of lowball estimate. And so in those 3 months, I have determined that my animals have gone up by 225 pounds. And in the last 3 months, I lost 0 animals. In the last 2.5 months, I lost 0 animals. My death loss was borderline 0. All right. Let's just, because this is effectively my numbers. Let's say that, because over the last 2 months, I think the last time I lost an animal, it may have been 2.5, 3 months ago. But in terms of an overall sense, I lost 3 animals out of 85 so far. Okay, I've ran about 85 cattle for the year and I've lost 3. And when you take a look at my numbers, and also I'm not looking to give myself a freebie, but one of the animals that I brought home was legitimately sick and got another animal sick, and those 2 animals died. And one of the animals died on grazing too much wheat. All right, so that's how my 3 animals died for the year. But I lost 3 out of 85 animals. All right, I lost 3 out of 85. When you take a look at my numbers are better than the commercial average. Legitimately better than the commercial average. Like, multi-billion, hundreds of billions, trillions of dollar beef industry. My numbers are better than their averages. And I managed to do it in a backyard by myself. All right, you have to understand that, it just is what it is, okay? And so, my whole situation, so let's say I take a look at my balance sheet and I say I have 28 animals, and these 28 animals are completely stable. I reinvested my earnings. Let's just say I've reinvested my earnings, right? And I took all of the money that I made and I reinvested it, and I actually expanded my balance sheet from having 47 animals to having 64 animals to having 62 animals. I've gotten net positive. I've gotten net positive 15 animals. So let's say I've gotten net positive 15 animals, and I managed to do that by using 0 debt and just reinvesting the money that I make. So now I'm in a situation where I have expanded my balance sheet by 15 animals. I have 28 stabilized animals. Those 28 stabilized animals have been raised by me for the last 3 months, and I have determined that they have gone up in value a reasonable amount. I have logically determined that they have gone up in value, and to give myself a safety buffer for leverage, I am not going to leverage against the unrealized gain. I will only leverage against the number of animals that I have. Makes a lot of sense, right? I would not leverage against the unrealized gain. I would simply leverage against the number of animals that I have. And when I do that, I would be able to just go and buy 28 more animals and not worry about it, because ultimately, let's say that I have determined that I don't want to sell the 28 animals yet, but I want to use the money that I have in the animals without liquidating them, then I can go to the bank and take a loan. And if I take a loan for the number of animals that I have, and I, purchase, let's say that I have animals that weigh 550 pounds and I purchase them at 250, that 300 pound, and granted that the 500, the 300 pound difference is effectively the unrealized gain. And that is the safety buffer for my balance sheet for me utilizing leverage. So I could grow the size of my herd by not even liquidating the animals, and I would still not even be taking my balance sheet into the negative. My balance sheet would still be in the positive, and I could effectively just go out and buy 28 more animals, right? I'm already net positive another 15 animals. And let's say that 2 months later, let's say that over those 2 months, I stabilize another 28 animals, and I've sold the 28 animals that I leveraged against, and I paid my loan back, and I have enough money to buy another 20 more. Right? Let's say I liquidated those 28 animals, I paid my 28 animal loan back, and I still made a net profit to buy 15 more animals. Well, I still have a net profit of 15 animals that I've stabilized. Right? The whole thing was that I sold animals. I brought home a profit. I expanded my balance sheet by not using any debt. Then I leveraged against the stabilized animals that I have, just the number of animals that I have, not the unrealized gain. So when I did that, I still have a net positive evaluation of 15 animals because I did not use any debt to buy those 15 animals. I used the money that I made from selling my animals. So let's say that I sell 28 animals 2 months later. Let's say I sell 28 animals, and those 28 animals, when I sell them, I make enough money to, let's just say, buy 50. Let's say I make enough money to buy 48. And so I pay the bank back their 48 animals. I still have 20 animals worth of money. And let's say out of the 15 calves, let's just give it a low ball estimate and say 12 survived. So I have 12 animals in the net positive. I still have the animals, the rest of the animals, right? I mean, the total number of animals I have is, within a couple of weeks, it'll be about 60 or 62, 58 to 62 animals. I still have animals left over. And so I take a look at my balance sheet and I say, well, I have enough money to buy 20 animals. I also have 15 animals that I've stabilized. And I also have the rest of my herd, the rest of my stabilized herd, right? I add that up. Let's say I took a loan for 20 animals, 28 animals. I made enough money to buy 48. I paid the bank back their 28. That leaves me with 20. I have 62 animals total, so that'd be 32 animals left over. 15 of them right now are high risk, and the other 17 are stabilized. So I take a look at the situation and I say, well, now my 15 animals that were high risk have also become low risk animals, stabilized animals. So I have 32 animals. I have 32 stabilized animals, have gone up in value, appreciated in value, and I also have enough cash to buy 20 more. Right? Then I could go to the bank and I could just buy 50 and I could just go to the bank and buy another 50 animals. Just tell them, give me a loan for 50 animals and just go and buy 50, 60 more. Right? That's effectively the situation that I will be in very shortly. Here in about 2 months, I will have to buy about 120 animals. But that's effectively why. That's what it looks like. Right? If I have a stabilized animal and I have raised that animal myself and increased the value of that animal, and I have appraised that animal, and I have come to the objective conclusion that the value of the animal has appreciated when I leverage against that animal, granted that I don't buy an animal as big as that animal, I buy an animal that's smaller, then the difference in the weight, let's say I buy a 250-pound animal using debt, but I have a 550-pound animal that's been stabilized by me, and I effectively raised that animal from, let's just say, 3 1/4. So that animal has put on 225 pounds over 3 months, which is 75 pounds a month. I have determined that my animal has gone up in value pretty substantially. When I leverage against the animal and buy a 250-pound animal, there is a safety margin in that leverage because of the unrealized gain in the animal that I leveraged against. Right? And so I can legitimately just, and what does this look like? Realistically, over the next 2 months, over the next 3 months, I would have to purchase about 120 to 140 cattle, and I wouldn't even be close to being in the negative. I legitimately would still be so far in the net positive that it wouldn't even matter. All right, and this is also what I talk about when I say, the amount of money that I am making is becoming so drastic. This is what I mean, right? I've been talking about this for a long time, and the whole thing about this is that I legitimately showed you exactly step by step everything that I was doing. I even told you exactly how I did it. All right, and at the end of the day, I mean, I didn't make it up. All right, I didn't make it up, and I actually made it. I'm living proof. I've actually made it. Okay, and as of today, the amount of money that I'm making is becoming so drastic that I can effectively do anything on the planet. Effectively anything, short of being an idiot. I can do anything. All right, I legitimately make so much money running cattle that I actually make more money running cattle than anybody on the planet makes doing anything, and it's by a lot. Like multiple hundreds of times more money. All right, and at the end of the day, it just is what it is. There's no reason for me to be poor. All right, I'm not going down with a bunch of poor people. I mean, why would I do that? I mean, I'm not being malicious about it. Just take a look at it from my perspective, okay? I mean, when you take a look at what I'm doing, I legitimately managed to become like one of the most capable farmers in the entire world, if not the most capable farmer that the world has ever seen. And I'm legitimate one of the best businessmen on the entire planet. I can, and just to put things in perspective, if we're going to, it doesn't matter. You can take a look at my cattle. My cattle are effectively better than the commercial average. My grass, I grow grass better than the commercial standard. I'm not even going to call it the commercial average. I'm going to call it the commercial standard. My cattle, and I've talked about this, like the living conditions and the whole everything for my cattle is actually drastically higher. The living conditions and the animal welfare and how well I take care of my animals, everything, it's just my farm has drastically higher living conditions and better results than the commercial standard. All right, legitimately, I grow grass better than practically anybody on the entire planet. My business makes more money than any business on the entire planet, just about. And the thing about being a good businessman is that if I legitimately had $5,000, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 with zero difficulty within 2 years. That's what I mean by I am effectively so good at business that I'm one of the best in the world. All right, and the whole thing about and when we take a look at it for what it is today, I actually make more money on my commercial cattle ranch on 50 acres of land than anybody on the planet makes just about doing anything. And it's by a lot. All right, when it comes to business, I am effectively one of the best businessmen on the entire planet. If I had $5,000, I could legitimately turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in less than 2 years. No problem. Farming is not easy, okay? And the whole thing about this is, I've already said that, the whole thing about the barrier of entry when it comes to farming, the barrier of entry is just sheerly the amount of work. If you legitimately are looking to become a farmer, the amount of effort that you will have to put in to make it is so drastic that almost everybody quits. Legitimately, it is that difficult. That's the barrier of entry. And that's also why I say, when it comes to the barrier of entry, the most reasonable way to get across that barrier of entry is to teach yourself how to farm. Because farming does not really cost any money. It doesn't really cost any money. And take a look at my balance sheet. If it costs me, which it doesn't cost me any, I've already talked about farming does not cost, but let's just say that the fertilizer costs me money. Let's just say that the grain costs me money. Let's just say whatever, the medication costs me money. When we add up the grain and the fertilizer, how much money are we talking about? Like $4,000, right? Like $4,000. Not even the fertilizer, the medication, and the grain. It's about $4,000. How much money did I bring home last week? Right, like $33,750. I just take the $4,000 out of the $33,000 that I make. I just take the $4,000 out of the $34,000 that I make. I don't care about the costs. All right, the money is negligible. And this is also, the whole idea of bringing on the wealth mindset. Being wealthy, like the mindset, I think that my mindset is different when you actually take a look, when you analyze what the things that I think about, you will find that it is very different. Because, and I talked about this, but what if I started saying things and I started believing things that poor people say and poor people believe? It would effectively turn me poor. But this is also why, I give you, the things that I see. And grain does not cost me anything. Grain makes me money. All right. Fertilizer does not cost me anything. Fertilizer makes me money. Cattle don't cost me anything. Cattle make me money. Granted that an animal does not die, it makes me money. Cattle make me money. Cattle don't cost me anything. Granted that I understand the appraisal value of the animal and I understand objectively what I am doing with the animal and I raise the animal to a commercial standard, etc., etc. Cattle don't cost anything unless they die. All right, and my death loss has been like under 3%, like 4%. All right, so it's very low. It's a very negligible amount of money. And when an animal dies, when an animal gets sick, I am more upset about losing the animal than I am the money. I don't care about the money. All right, I'm more, I guess what you would call upset. I feel worse about losing the animal than I do about losing the money. I don't care about the money. All right, the money is whatever. I don't care about the money. All right, I'm more worried, I'm more upset about losing the animal than I am the money. I don't care about the money. All right, the money, who cares? I could put $2 million in a hole right now and light that money on fire and it wouldn't even matter. All right, I don't care about the money. And this and this is also why I look to pass on the mindset idea. I legitimately, but take a look at my business. Let's say it costs me $4,000 to run my business and my business makes me $34,000. I just take that $4,000 out of the $34,000 that I make. And then I got 30 grand, right? The 30 grand, and then what do I do with the money? I grow my business. All right, and what does that look like? Well, realistically, I will legitimately take my balance sheet from 47 animals to like 60, 64 animals in the next 2 weeks. That's what it looks like. All right, the amount of money that I'm making as of today is so drastic that I actually make more money as a cattleman on 50 acres than anybody on the planet makes just about doing anything. All right, and the whole thing about this is that at the end of the day, it just is what it is, right? Like I actually did it, and when it comes to farming, your opinions are not going to do anything. Your opinions don't mean anything. Farming is a very difficult skill set, and if you do not learn how to do it, and just a realistic perspective is that farming is legitimately so difficult that almost nobody makes it. I actually don't know anybody even doing 10% of not even 10%. Farming is so difficult that legitimately almost everybody quits. Almost everybody, or barely makes enough to get by. Legitimately, that's the reality of the situation. Farming is so difficult that practically nobody can do it. People don't go into farming to make a lot of money. And when you take a look at what I'm doing, I actually make more money as a cattleman farmer than anybody on the planet makes just about doing anything. And my income is actually going up very quickly. I've already determined that I will just reinvest the money back into my business. I'm not using any debt, and I'm still growing my balance sheet by almost 20% compounding every month. 15% compounding every month, and with zero debt. All right, farming is not some easy thing, and at the end of the day, I actually made it. And at the end of the day, I would legitimately consider myself financially rich. I wouldn't say that I'm wealthy, but I am rich. Legitimately. I managed to get myself into a situation where, and at the end of the day, and why I don't feel bad about saying any of this stuff because I worked for it. It's mine. It's whatever. Even if I had nothing, I could redo it all in 3 seconds. I could turn $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years, no problem, as a farmer. With nothing. All right, at the end of the day, I worked for it. It's mine. You don't like it? Have fun dying poor. All right, I worked for it. I'm living proof that it's possible. And, and if it makes me sound like a horrible person, God knows that I'm not being malicious about it. I'm not being malicious, okay? I worked for it. It's my money. I understand that I make, massively more money than effectively almost everybody. I understand that. And if you think that it's unfair, then, have fun dying poor. See if you can even do 10%. All right, I didn't, see if you can even do 10%. All right, or, work on getting better. I mean, work on getting better, okay? Work on getting better. Work on doing better for yourself. Don't die a bum. All right, don't die a bum. Don't start going off into Disneyland. Don't start having, don't start going off into Disneyland, okay? If you go off into Disneyland, you're probably never coming back. All right, where your life's a magical adventure and you're important and all. Don't start going into this. Actually, start working on getting better. All right, work on getting better. Work on having a plan for yourself and doing better for yourself. All right, legitimately. And when I say this thing, when I say this, like, what is something that I am working on right now to improve my situation? Expanding my balance sheet, buying myself a new piece of land, right? Thinking about what I should do with my money, not being an idiot. Stuff like that. I mean, work on getting better, right? Those are things that I have clearly indicated that I am currently working on. Right? Work on something that will legitimately improve your life. Work on something that will put you in a positive direction. Don't start doing circles in Disneyland. If you start doing circles in Disneyland, you will never leave Disneyland. All right, put yourself in some kind of a right direction and start doing better for yourself. All right, and just as living proof and just as, it is what it is, over the last 2.5 years, I managed to grow my business by over 1,000%. All right, I've been working on this thing for a long time. And even before that, all right, I mean, I've been working on this thing for like half of my entire life now. I'm 33 years old, and I've been working on this thing for practically half of my entire life. I didn't even really make it until 2 years ago. All right, and I don't feel bad about saying stuff like, oh my God, it's inconsiderate. It's not inconsiderate. All right, it's not what I worked for it. It's mine. Even if I had nothing, I could redo it all in 3 seconds. If I had $5,000, I could turn that into $100,000 in 2 years, no problem as a farmer, no problem. All right, I worked for it. It's my, oh my God, it's inconsiderate. Oh my God, he's a prick and he's an arrogant jerk. And I'm not being malicious about it. I worked for it. I legitimately had to work balls to the wall for like half of my entire life. All right, and, it just is what it is, all right? I don't know how else to put it. I'm not going to go down a poor person. I'm not going to go, why would I choose to be poor? Nobody would choose to be poor. Effectively nobody. Why would I choose to be poor? Right? I understand that I make, disproportionately way more money than effectively anybody on the entire planet. I understand that. But I didn't do it on some magical journey. It effectively took me like half of my entire life. I legitimately worked balls to the wall. I lived where I worked. And I worked sometimes more than 15 hours a day for years straight. All right, when you take a look at it, I'm effectively one of the most capable farmers, if not the most capable farmer that the world has ever seen. Legitimately one of the best businessmen that the world has ever seen. If I had $5,000 and nothing else, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years, no problem, cash. By myself. All right, that's effectively just another way of, I might even be able to do it in 1 year. And it is what it is. I mean, I worked for it. What does it matter, right? I mean, I worked for it, and when I say things like, I can put $2 million in a hole and I can light it on fire and it wouldn't even matter. I'm not being inconsiderate. I'm not being arrogant about it. I'm not being a jerk about it. I'm just telling you it is what it is, and at the end of the day, I worked for it. All right, I didn't do some easy thing. This was like, and if you want to figure out what I'm talking about, then, and I've always said that I don't like saying that this was borderline impossible, because I believe that makes me, that makes my, belief in God, look shaky, and I don't, and that, and I don't, I'm just gonna say what it took was a very long time. I'm not gonna say that it was borderline impossible, because my faith in God is better than that. What I will say is that it took a long time. A long time. If you want to learn how to grow grass like me, it will take a long time. If you want to learn how to run cattle like me, it will take a long time. If you want to learn how to run a business like me, it will take a long time. I legitimately worked for over 15 hours a day, for years on end at times. Legitimately. There were times when I was working 20 hours a day for weeks straight. All right, and it just is what it is. And, and I'm not being arrogant about it. It just is what it is. And as of today, I effectively make so much money that I can effectively do anything on the entire planet short of being an idiot. I actually make more money as a cattleman than anybody on the planet makes doing just about anything. And it's by a lot. A lot. And the whole thing about this is that I've actually shown you how to do it. Nobody did that for me. I shown you how I did it. I showed you how I did it. I legitimately gave you exact information, more or less, the exact information. I told you exactly what I was going to do. And at the end of the day, things actually turned out a little bit better than I imagined. I actually did better than I thought. All right, I would say that I probably did about 7% better than I thought. I had a clear idea of the direction that I was going, and but I did better than I thought, and that's also where I give my I'm grateful, and in terms of my whole belief in God, I'm grateful. Okay, I didn't anticipate that things were going to turn out this well. All right, and that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.